Welcome to This Must Be the Place. I'm your host, Alo Galinsky. Each week, I'll uncover what's happening in Sonoma County, diving into the hidden gems and quirky corners. I'll be interviewing some of our local legends, as well as people you didn't know you need to know, all through the eyes of a craft beer enthusiast living in wine country. Join me as we explore one sip, one story, and one adventure at a time, and together we'll find out why this must be the place. Today, we are joined by an artist widely recognized for his dynamic performances and innovative programming, Francesco Lecce-Chong. As the esteemed music director of the Santa Rosa Symphony, he has been described by the San Francisco Chronicle as first-rate. Maestro Lecce-Chong has brought a new era of energy and community engagement to the Santa Rosa Symphony, leading them to their first ever commercial recording and launching groundbreaking initiatives like the First Symphony Project. We'll discuss his unique approach to blending timeless classics with bold new compositions, the power of music to build community, and what audiences can expect from the Santa Rosa Symphony's exciting journey toward their centennial season. Welcome, Maestro.
Thank you, Alo. It's so wonderful to be here.
As we were just chatting about, I'm a classical music enthusiast and have it in my background and blood, so I'm really enthusiastic to chat with you and find out all things your background and what's going on for the symphony this season. You've been appointed music director of two U.S. orchestras, both the Eugene Symphony and the Santa Rosa Symphony, before turning 30. I'd love you to tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a conductor of not one, but two symphonies.
Sure, it's definitely been a wild ride. Obviously, many fortunate things have happened, and so much of the world of the arts is being at the right place at the right time. And I feel like I've just been so fortunate in many ways, which is also kind of why I'm so passionate about kind of returning that as well to the communities that I'm a part of. But I got my start growing up in Boulder, Colorado. My mother was an artist, my dad was an architect, so I there were no musicians in my larger family at all, but I had a chance to be creative. Like that was always an important part of growing up. So I had a lot of support to kind of like find my own adventure, which happened to be just incessantly banging on the family piano to the point that they were like, maybe we should get him lessons. So that was kind of the earliest days. But I think, my path to becoming a conductor, I guess it could have been seen coming because I basically wanted to get my hands on everything. So by the time I was graduating high school, I was playing piano and violin and viola and clarinet. Youth orchestra was my favorite night of the week. I wanted to be a composer at the time. And at the same time, I was like studying conducting even in high school. So I wanted my hands on like everything music wise that I could. And ultimately I loved like working with other musicians. Like that was a big part of my work. Even if I had to like practice, 4 or 5 hours a day by myself, the end goal for me was to be able to connect with other people and share it with other musicians. So I think even, going into college, I was pretty confident in kind of the direction I wanted to take things, even if I didn't know exactly what I'd be doing. I did my undergrad in New York at the Mannes College of Music as a pianist, and first as a composer and pianist, and then quickly switching over to the conducting program. Again, I stubbornly just, knocked on the door of the conducting department incessantly until I was allowed to audition and join that area.
Did you
And
knock
after
in three,
that,
four time, or was it anything percussive or?
yeah, exactly, right. Man, I did everything I could to get their attention. It was great, and once I was in the conducting program, I knew this was the direction I wanted to go because I mean it doesn't get in some sense, at least for my sensibilities, to be able to bring together 70, 80, 90, over 100 musicians to make music together. It's a very special way of experiencing music that you just can't otherwise. I mean, there's obviously every genre of music is unique and wonderful in its own way, but having to bring this many people together to be able to recreate the great symphonic repertoire is something wholly of itself. It literally takes a community to make it happen. And I did my grad work in Philadelphia at the Curtis Institute of Music. Got to be the last class with a really legendary conductor. His name was Otto Werner Mueller, who really taught the generation actually before me. He was already in his 80s when I got to work with him. And at that point, you usually do a bunch of assistantships as a conductor, so that you can learn kind of under the great music directors. And so I was with the Milwaukee Symphony for 4 years. with the Pittsburgh Symphony for 3 years. And after that, I was able to get on the radar from some smaller orchestras to be invited to, interview and audition. And I will say, this was also very surprising that, Eugene and Santa Rosa were essentially the very first orchestras that invited me to apply. And I thought, okay, what's the chance I'm going to win both? I might as well, go through the full process with both orchestras, thinking there's no way I'm going to get both. And then there I was, in 2018, kind of juggling both orchestras. And now just this past year, I concluded my tenure in Eugene so that I can really focus all of my time and effort in Santa Rosa.
Well, it sounds like you've conducted yourself very well over the last handful of
Nice.
years, for lack of better punnage over here. But what was that moment where you thought, like, "Hey, I can do this for a living"? Are there any words of wisdom for other young people out there wanting to make a music dream into a reality?
Ooh, I mean, so many different moments along the way. I think, as far as like moments. I don't know if it was like moments for like me as much as moments that I like experienced. And it goes to, I'm sure, what we'll talk about later, which is, a lot of the community work that I'm trying to do in Santa Rosa. But it just all it ever takes is like that one moment when you like hear something that you love. And for every child to have a chance to hear an orchestra, the overwhelming sound, the way it like surrounds you is just unlike anything else. And I can remember the first time I heard a Beethoven symphony or like a Tchaikovsky symphony, or like the first time I got to listen to like Itzhak Perlman play live. Like a few of these like amazing moments. Like the first time I saw Yo-Yo Ma, like I remember these moments because they were just spectacular. And I was like, I want to be a part of that. Like that's, something amazing. As far as it for as advice for young people, I mean, it's just to immerse yourself in the world. I mean, there's so many different directions that you can take in music. Especially in the world that we have now, with so many musicians being able to carve out kind of their own path, whatever it is that they want to do, whether it's play smaller ensembles, play an orchestra, travel the world sharing music, teach, they're in so many different places. The options are like all out there, and I think just being able to immerse yourself with whatever is around you and the arts that are around you, I think we all catch the bug in some way.
Right, absolutely. And as you said, I mean, there's a community aspect versus immersion aspect to everything. And kind of flipping the script a little bit, you've had the privilege of being mentored by several renowned conductors, including Michael Tilson Thomas. What is a valuable piece of advice you've received from a mentor that has stuck with you throughout your storied career?
Ooh, so I mean, there's so much. I am constantly reviewing, everything from like the big picture things that I've learned from mentors to just like every time I open up a score that I previously learned under one of my mentors. Just all the markings in it makes you feel like they're right there back in the room with you, which is it's a really special thing. And I think that's one of the unique things about the conducting world, especially, is there really is a tradition. Like everything has been passed down. I'm only so many steps away from like Mahler and like Bernstein, and like you're in a tradition. Like the moment you're there studying with other conductors who study with other conductors, like you can connect it all the way back, back to the like 1800s. And so it's kind of an amazing thing how these traditions and ideas get passed down. I think it's interesting because it's not like necessarily musical, but I think it very much affects the way that I work. And something that I always keep in mind was actually a master class that I did with David Robertson with the St. Louis Symphony. It was early on in my career, which I think I remember it mainly because I was so terrified at the moment because it was going to be a public master class, with one of the great American orchestras, with one of the great American conductors. And it was, at the time I hadn't spent a lot of time conducting big orchestras. So I was kind of terrified by the whole experience and knowing that it was going to happen as a public showcase. And I remember like right before we went on stage, David asked me, or he asked us as a group, is there anything in particular that you're anxious about? And I remember, bringing up the idea that like, look, oh God, how old was I? I don't know. I was like 20, three, 20, I don't know, and I remember, my anxiety was, listen, I'm gonna be up there. Not only am I young, but the orchestra is gonna know that I don't have that much experience. And how am I, it's fine, I can wave my arms correctly, like I've been studying that, but how am I supposed to rehearse? Like how am I supposed to make the music grow, make it, how do I make it better when every musician on that stage has more experience than me? And I'll never forget, he had such a great way of putting it that just relaxed me right away, which was he was like, well, imagine you're in the orchestra and I'm conducting, okay? And he's like, we play, a movement of the symphony. And then he said, afterwards, we're done. I just say, we're going to play it again. And I said, okay. And he says, well, how are you going to play it the second time? He said, are you going to play it exactly the same, or are you going to try to play it better? And I said, well, I'm going to try to play it better. And he's like, well, there you go. The idea being that we're all in this together. Like everybody is there for the same reason. Like we're all perfectionists as musicians. And it's not the job of the conductor to come down from above with a message from God, but that actually we are all like the conductor is a conduit to help everyone be able to be better because for better or worse, being a musician is being a perfectionist, is being so eccentric about little details and always trying to improve things. And I'm sorry, that's kind of rather a long story, but I always remember that in the work that I do. And I think it's a very honest way of being collaborative, not just saying you're being collaborative, but knowing that when you're in a room there, no matter what musicians you're working with, whether a youth orchestra or whether the San Francisco Symphony, that that's your guiding light, that we're all there for the same reason. It's really quite inspiring, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely nice to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the people that you are conducting, and also they're probably thinking, if we were conducting, there's those synergies there, and also so much of art and performance art is that collaborative, as you said, the means of getting everybody together for a common cause with all these unique individual personalities, people coming from different days, different backgrounds, and putting your best foot forward. That's really good advice to have received, I'm sure, and gives you a different perspective how to look at things.
Yeah.
Now, honing in on Santa Rosa Symphony and what's coming up this season, I'd love you to give our listeners a quick overview of what's coming up with the symphony.
Sure. It's so exciting. I mean, it's one of the most exciting jobs that you get as a music director and one of the biggest responsibilities is to, plan these entire seasons of music. I mean, you have 300 years, more than 300 years of repertoire to draw from. And you're really trying to take people on a journey. And one of the special things in Santa Rosa is, we have kind of our seven like main stage classical series concerts that we do at the Green Music Center. And we get to do them three times, Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays. So we really get a lot of time to grow with these programs. And one of the things that makes it really special here in Santa Rosa is that we have a really robust and supportive like subscriber base. So we have people that buy into the full season. And that's really important as a music director because I want to be able to take audiences on a whole journey through the season. I don't look for like a theme for the whole season, but I program each concert to actually provide like a very different experience, each time. So for instance, as we speak right now, we're working on very much a Spanish inspired program. We'll go into December with like two of the big German works, the Brahms Violin Concerto and a suite from Strauss's opera Der Rosenkavalier. The December program is something really special, and I think very much represents a lot of the ideas behind the programming that we do here in Santa Rosa. Having an incredible rising star violinist, Geneva Lewis, for the Brahms Violin Concerto. And also, we're going to have a composer joining us, the incredible Jimmy Lopez, who has written so many incredible orchestral works for the top orchestras around the world. And we're doing a piece called I Know. We're actually giving its West Coast premiere, but it was a work written for the Chicago Symphony and the Concertgebouw Orchestra. So it's good company to put yourselves in. And so that's such a fun program where we're able to kind of bring together new and old and bring a lot of different energy into the concert hall. And then moving on, throughout the season, we always have kind of like one like big main commission that we do each year. It's something that's really important to me to be able to show kind of where the art form is going and to be able to make sure that the Santa Rosa Symphony is a part of of making sure that our art form stays relevant and continues to grow. So we're working with a wonderful composer out of Sacramento, Ying Lee. We're doing probably many commissions with her over the years, but the first big one is going to be this coming spring. It's a concerto for 6 instruments. So actually, 6 of our own musicians are going to be stepping up in front of the orchestra to play this absolutely wild concerto, which is going to be so much fun. So, something really, really different there. And then, we're in the midst of a Mahler cycle right now. So going back to the classics, I actually think it's very important that we spend some time with Mahler, not just as the composer that wrote some of the biggest and most spectacular symphonies in the repertoire, but actually as a composer who I think represents in some sense why we need music in our lives. Like someone who really plumbed the depths of what it means to be human and found a way to put that in music in a way that no other composer has. And that's kind of my approach to the Mahler symphonies is sure, there's 110 people on stage and it's a 75-minute symphony, but at the end of the day, it's about each of us as individuals. It's some of the most painfully intimate music. It's, Mahler laying himself on the couch and we're the therapist. And he's pouring his soul out to us. And I think in that sense, we get a deeper understanding of ourselves through that music. So that's kind of my lens for the Mahler symphonies. It's not about spectacle, it's actually about the human connection. So, and then we finished the season quite in a really fun way, which is putting together the idea of Tchaikovsky and Shakespeare.
Ooh, cool.
Tchaikovsky, the great Russian composer. Not a lot of people know that it's not just Romeo and Juliet, which is one of his most famous pieces, but he wrote a bunch of pieces based on Shakespeare's works. So I'm going to pair Romeo and Juliet, which everybody knows, with a really obscure work that he wrote for Hamlet. It's a 20-minute tone poem based on Hamlet,
Cool.
which I think is incredible. I have no idea why orchestras don't play this piece more often. So I'm excited to kind of combine those two ideas together. And we're actually going to have a Shakespearean actor come to read some of the monologues in between the pieces, because I think what I'm hoping for that program is the audience will actually hear the melodic writing of Shakespeare, like how there's actually like a meter and a
Oh,
flow to that
absolutely.
writing and how that might have influenced Tchaikovsky as well.
I've seen a lot of Shakespeare and performed from Shakespeare myself, and there's absolutely a patter, a flow, and some melody and lyricalness to his work. So I'm really intrigued. I'm gonna have to come out and see that. So you've been talking about building this season, but as a more general kind of overview, as music director, how do you approach programming for diverse audiences and ensure that concerts are exciting for everyone, from seasoned classical enthusiasts to first-time concert goers?
It's definitely the biggest challenge that I think a music director faces. And not to mention that we also, as individuals, have our own biases. Like I have certain things that I just want to do because I like them, and so how do you kind of navigate that whole world? And I think a lot of it is the approach I take to it is it's not just the music that we're going to put together, which of course, I do want to make sure that I represent that full 300 years of music. And I think I kind of use that as my hallmark. I think as a lot of orchestras, there's been like a separation of like artistic quality and then like especially in recent years trying to perform like underrepresented composers and they separate those two things. And to me, if I'm doing my job, those are the same thing because you can't have quality without the full representation of what our repertoire is. And so for me, they're very much in the same thing. So when I perform, when we perform, for instance, like in this in our opening week, we played music by Julia Perry, who was quite a big name in the 60s and 70s. They had a piece recorded by the New York Philharmonic, and the first black female composer to be performed by the New York Philharmonic. Like it was a huge deal. But I presented the piece because that's an important like moment in the history of American music. Like it's not just because we're trying to bring someone who has been kind of neglected by orchestras around the country, but that actually she represents something very important. And so I actually paired it with Leonard Bernstein's West Side Story
Oh,
because
cool.
these are actually works that are very much connected to New York City and the vibes of like the 60s. So for me, what's really important is how we tell the stories of these works. So any repertoire that I bring in, maybe it's an unfamiliar work, maybe it's a very familiar work, but I always want us to approach these works as something fresh. So it's not just like I'm coming to a concert and the conductor programmed this, random work at the beginning by some living composer, and I have no idea what it is. I don't understand it. And then, oh, and here's my Beethoven, thank God. But that I try to put together works so that we experience both works anew. And I found this in my own career, actually, that, my fascination with new music isn't because I just want to do new music, but it's because it helps me appreciate the classics better. I
Sure.
think it helps the orchestra appreciate the classics better. And at its core, my deepest hope is that it's going to help the audience appreciate the classics in a different way. Like, we won't hear Beethoven in the same way if we understand the fragility of the creative process and the amount of sheer effort it takes for a composer to, in their head, figure out, how to get 80 musicians to accomplish something together. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing. We don't talk about it enough. Like, how insane is it not just to write a great piece of music, but to be able to write it in a way so that all these different instruments and all these different people can be able to create that vision together, just off of paper. I mean, it's mind blowing, really. And I think that's what I kind of hone in on with our audience when they come to a concert, that they'll know that pieces on the program aren't a mix of just things I like and things they might like, and special projects that I've been trying to do. But this is why it takes me, oh dear God, I mean, I plan years in advance, right? Like, I'm planning things in the 2029 right now, right? So you're planning like 2, 3, 4 years in advance, but that's kind of what it takes, because everything is constantly shifting. And I'll go through, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 drafts of a season, just because I'm constantly adjusting and constantly finding the right combination of pieces, because that's my big shot. When the audience is in there, it's a huge responsibility. It's not like going to an art museum where you get to choose how long you want to look at a painting or
Sure.
which one you want to look at. In some sense, you're trusting me with an hour and a half to 2 hours of your life. And I want to make sure that I've put the amount of effort into that so that that experience is meaningful.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And as with all arts, there's storytelling, there's a narrative to be woven, and it sounds like you're trying to find the right balance and kind of right logistics to do that, especially when you think of things that are coming up, contextually in the world is also important.
Yeah.
So tell us about your conducting style. How do you ensure your vision is met while harnessing individual expression, delivering a cohesive sound and the journey for a piece?
It's such an interesting question, because I do, and I totally understand that I get a lot of questions about, like, how I conduct. Every conductor is so unique, and like especially like visually, like how we look. It's actually kind of amazing that between conductors, even if we study with the same people, no two conductors are remotely alike. It's just very strange a thing, and I think it's just because our bodies are different and the way we want to use them is different. And even though we're communicating in the same things, and an orchestra can actually appreciate and understand those things, we each have kind of our own way of doing it. So I think, I don't really think in terms, even though I often get asked in terms of like physical style, like, and I think people hone in on that because I do want to physically ground the music. Like that is something that's really important to me, is to convey the energy to the orchestra, to be able to, instead of having to tell them, I want this to be played a certain way, but to be able to show them how I want that to be played, is something that you can embody physically, and can often look like I'm literally like living the music. And I think that, that is, finding that balance is something that's really important, especially as I get older and like I don't want to entirely wreck my body on the podium at every concert. Finding that targeted energy to give is so important. I think about my conducting style more in terms of like the approach to the music, where like I was saying earlier, you definitely can approach conducting from like top down, where the conductor has a vision and the orchestra is there to help realize that vision. And I know several successful conductors who I work with and very much admire who do that. Ultimately, I'm more on the other side, as a conductor who I want the orchestra to bring themselves to the music. I want to know that's what I love about being music director, is that you get to know your players. You get to know their tendencies and like what the way they like to move things and the way they like to go through things, and they learn your tendencies. And what's really fun over the years, we're now, 8 years in Santa Rosa, is I don't even notice like how effortless and how much fun it is now, and how comfortable it is that, I kind of know what a player is going to do if I just give them the space to do something special. And they know that I will trust them to bring everything of themselves. That I'm not going to like put a lid on it and ask them to kind of show less or be, a little less wild about things. Like I love kind of cultivating that sense of individualism. So like yes, we are one orchestra, but when you have a solo, when you have a moment, like that's you. Like just
Right.
go for it. And that's been really that's always been something that's very important to me. That like let the orchestra play. Like just let them like really dig into things and kind of, play on that edge. Like I've definitely always been a conductor that was like, if you don't make any mistakes in a concert, like if the orchestra doesn't make any mistakes, it probably wasn't a good concert. Like it means that it wasn't risky enough. It means we didn't play with enough passion. Because when you play with everything you've got, like there's going to be a few gnarly edges, and that's amazing. Like that's the best part about music. Otherwise, go listen to a recording, right? Because that is
Right.
perfect. But if you're coming to a live concert, maybe obviously I'm not expecting the audience to hear mistakes because they're not going to be that obvious. But we should be pushing ourselves as an orchestra, to that level where we are totally zoned in on what we are trying to express with the music, and an errant thing here or there, it better not get in the way of that.
Well, it sounds like you've come up with a great offshoot album or group called the Gnarly Edges, led by Maestro Lecce-Chong.
I love that. I love that. That's gonna be
That could
like
be a great
yeah,
improv
I'm gonna do
group
an
or a little
offshoot
outtake
series.
album of the Santa Rosa Symphony's recordings. So maybe you got to look into that.
Thank you. I'm gonna remember that.
Now, tell our listeners about the First Symphony Project. What inspired it? What was the most rewarding thing about it or things about it?
Yeah, it was again one of those right place, right time things where I just feel so fortunate that I had the time, the resources, and the support to pull something like this off. It actually really was instigated by Santa Rosa. So I had officially started in Eugene 1 year ahead of Santa Rosa, and when I decided to take the second orchestra, which was Santa Rosa, it was very important to me that I wouldn't just like happen to have two orchestras. Like I didn't want it to just be like, okay, great, now I'm just going to be twice as busy. I wanted to be able to do at least one thing that I knew I wouldn't be able to do with only one orchestra. And so what I realized that I could do is offer composers a very unique opportunity to write for both orchestras. So they get multiple performances from two different groups and really get to leave an impact. And so what happened with the First Symphony Project, it was basically the first thing that I did as music director. Was I always dreamed of the idea of kind of returning the idea of like patronage to commissions. When you think of like all the famous works in our repertoire, they were usually commissioned by individuals. So there wasn't like an orchestra artistically saying, "Hey, we're going to commission, this composer." It was very often like one, patron, like one donor who would say, "I love Beethoven," and I'm a king or I'm a duke, and I'm going to support like the next 50 things they write. I think that's actually a very beautiful thing because it really creates a sense of buy-in. And I think some of the issues with like the idea of new music for audiences is that we don't really connect them to it. We don't give them ownership of it. And so the idea around the First Symphony Project was, instead of having the orchestras fundraise, I actually just went directly to interested families in both Eugene and Santa Rosa. And I made myself the first donor, and that really sold it when I was like, okay, I'm going to be the first person to create this project, and now I need a few people to join me, and we're gonna build out this First Symphony Project. And it was a huge undertaking. It's 4 years, four composers, double residencies each year. So we did eight residencies with each orchestra. So I mean, it was a massive, massive project over 4 years. And the idea behind it was that no one was writing, well, in general, people are not writing symphonies anymore, which I think is really a shame. The biggest problem is that orchestras aren't willing to invest the time and take the risk on a piece that's going to be 30 minutes long. It's a very scary proposition because you don't know the quality of that piece. Nobody knows the quality of that piece. We won't know the quality of a new piece of music for another 50 to 100 years anyways, right? So there's it's a huge risk for an orchestra to take. So the biggest problem is we're risk adverse and we don't want to spend the time or the resources to put a 30-minute piece on a program that we don't know what it's going to sound like. So that's your number one problem. So I was trying to fight it back against that and say, hey, the symphony has been the most important vehicle for the symphony orchestra, like during the entire course of the modern orchestra. And the symphony has taken many forms. It's not always called a symphony, but the idea is that it is the composer's most personal and universal vision through music. Like that's the idea around it. And I wanted to see what four young composers would do with that idea now if I just said, carte blanche. I want a big orchestral work, and I want it to be your idea of the symphony in the 21st century. And it was a beautiful thing. I loved every second of it. It was a wild experience. But I think our audience really got to know these composers and really got to understand the immense artistic effort that went into creating each one of these symphonies. And just really grateful that I had an opportunity to do it. And I think it informs a lot of the work that I do now. Even though I don't have a name for a project, like I said, we always have at least one huge commission each season here at the Santa Rosa Symphony. And I think I learned a lot from the First Symphony Project that informs how I work with composers and how I present those works to audiences.
That's really cool. It sounds like such a unique project and a unique way to kind of tie everybody in together. And it really does bring that community aspect back to orchestra and the symphony. And, let's dig into the community a little bit, talking about the importance of a local symphony to the community. What is that importance? What role do you think the symphony should play in the community and has it played? And then I have some other follow-up questions for you about kind of the community of Santa Rosa and Sonoma County at large.
Yeah, sure. It's something that I think I become more passionate about every year. And I think it informs almost all of my work now, which is this idea that I think we're at a really amazing time for orchestras right now if we're willing to harness it. Because I think this is the most important time that I can remember for communities to have an orchestra because we are as a modern world, we are lacking opportunities for true connection. Right. Yeah. I mean, we're bombarded with all sorts of media all day long. We live in a world where we're told about all the things that separate us. And we live in a world where it's very easy to isolate yourself or surround yourself with only like-minded people or who you consider to be like-minded people. And I think finding these points of connection right now in our communities where we are reminded of how much more we have in common than all the things that we are told divide us is absolutely essential. And I think it's the only way that we move forward. Like basically the arts right now, we are the antidote. Like
Right.
we are the revolution in a sense to how the world is changing. Like, we represent, what it would mean to be able to be like in a healthy world again, where people respect each other and interact and have healthy conversations and believe in each other and believe in the best in each other. Like, I know these sound really high-minded, but we live in a world right now where we need any sense of that connection. And right now, the arts are an amazing point for that because we don't get to decide who we're in that concert hall with. And we get to share a really important experience together. We get to appreciate something together. And I think that's, my big thing right now is, orchestras are about creating happier, healthier, and stronger communities. Or at least that's what I believe about the Santa Rosa Symphony. Like that's my dream for us, is that that's what we're building every single day with every single concert. And so it happens just naturally through concerts. But of course, it happens through our family concerts, which I've taken on and really expanded so that whole families can really come to appreciate the orchestra together. We're now going to be going into libraries in the coming year, really getting across the whole county. We're going outdoors at wineries now for concerts. We're finding a lot of different ways to reach people where they are because again, these musical experiences are exactly, I think, what we need right now.
Yeah, and it's also fun to be able to showcase that you can bring something to others, as you were saying, what might be a unique setting for a symphony? Is it a museum? Is it a winery? Is it a really pretty schoolyard? There's all these places out there, but if you can be mobile and get there and get the community engaged, it only helps bring your awareness. And I know so much of marketing and awareness is bringing people inbound, but also going out to people. And people are more reticent to go out these days. And so being able to kind of meet them where they are is definitely important. How does the symphony engage with local community beyond performances? Are there other ways you're involved?
Yeah, I mean, I would say kind of the biggest ways through our education programs. I can't take credit for them. This orchestra, when I arrived, I could not believe the breadth of what this orchestra does as far as education. The amount of in-school education. We run what's called an El Sistema inspired program, which is an after-school program at Shepherd Elementary, which is in Roseland, where students get free, like after school, 2 hours of free music classes every single day with our
Cool.
teaching artists, and they have a chance over the course of their entire education essentially to learn an instrument and to be empowered with that instrument. And we're seeing the benefits of that as those young musicians are actually now joining our youth orchestras. And we have six different youth ensembles that we run as well. And the idea, behind this is it's obviously not just about a concert. It's about the ways that we're able to, partner with, schools and all the different organizations that help support these young people in our community. I think that's kind of where we're like laying some real groundwork outside of just like, oh, it's the arts, but also like, why is it important, for young people, like to have music in their lives and the skills that it's teaching them, the way it's preparing them to be, free thinkers and leaders like in that next generation, I think is an amazing thing. So I think that's, a really important aspect of what we do. And then like, even I guess there's still concerts, but of course, bringing those concerts to other organizations, whether it's, museums or libraries or parks, I think is kind of a really essential part of what we do. For me, my ambition, certainly one of my ambitions is that we become much more essential part of the civic life of Santa Rosa, which is something that can be a little bit difficult for us as the Santa Rosa Symphony because we play in Rohnert Park. We play at
Mhm.
the Sonoma State University in Rohnert Park. And I want to make sure that we start to establish a footprint back in Santa Rosa. I'm sure, there's many conversations that we read about all the time where the city is trying to revitalize downtown and kind of, be able to bring people around more often. And the Santa Rosa Symphony is not is we're an economic force, and we also bring thousands of people together, and I think we can be a really important part of where Santa Rosa as a city is also going as well.
So, kind of a follow-up question to that, a higher picture. Where do you see classical music going in the future, and how is the Santa Rosa Symphony uniquely poised to be on the forefront of that direction?
Ooh, that's something I think about a lot. I think if someone had figured out the answer for how classical music needs to evolve and adapt, I think we'd all be doing it and we'd all be very grateful. The way I see it is that we just can't be passive, right? We just can't accept the way things are, which can be hard, especially with, really large organizations and a lot of the big orchestras, they have obviously they're able to do incredible things with their size, but they're also not able to evolve as quickly. And one of the things I love being with an orchestra of our size, which is, still pretty large, is that, we are able to adapt and evolve quicker. And so I think being able to try multiple things is the most important thing. But I think like knowing that the primary idea behind our art form is being able to like tell the stories of us as humans and making sure that that always stays at the forefront of what we do is so important. I think one of the reasons the Santa Rosa Symphony has been so successful now as we head into our 100th year is it feels very much like a grassroots organization still. Like it feels like how it started, which was as a community orchestra, right? A group of people that were like, wouldn't it be nice to have some music in our community? Like let's have some musicians play at the high school. I mean, that's how this whole thing started. And but it's retained that feeling, which I just love, that we have, people that invite other people. Like our audience grows very organically. And I think that's a beautiful thing where people come to concerts not in spite of other people, but because of other people. Like you want to come to a concert because that's where your friends are, because that's your special evening each month where you want to be able to connect with people. And I think we need to like I know us as an orchestra at the Santa Rosa Symphony are really leaning into that idea. And I think the arts as a whole, like that's where the future of classical music is I think it's not there's been often like these kind of charges of like elitism in what we do. And the art itself is not elitist at all. And I firmly believe that. I think I can only do this work if I believe that, right? But I think sometimes we treat it that way. And that's the big difference,
Right.
right? We've seen a lot. The one thing I very strongly disagree with is changing the art form itself to suit where we think society is. Like I don't believe that's the right thing to do. Like I don't think encouraging people to use their cell phones during concerts or having the orchestra wear jeans when they play concerts, like that's not a thing. That's not a
No.
solution, right? That's a response to something that we made up. And I think, and we're giving up then. We're saying it's actually rather offensive because what we're saying is that the new generation can't understand Beethoven or like it anymore. Like that's crazy. Like this is just, and it's not true. Like I see that every day. It's absolutely not true. And so dumbing down our art form or trying to like make it more hip instead of realizing that it is remarkably hip. Like we are literally the sideshow that is doing all these crazy, wild, and fun things. Like these composers were crazy, wild people. And I think if we were to lay into that, and I hope that's what we're doing in Santa Rosa, is like just lay into that idea that like it is so wild and it's like you want to go to Burning Man, like you can go to Burning Man every week at one of my concerts, like you want to do something that's like kind of crazy and eclectic and unusual, like that's a concert for you. I mean, where else do you have to put your phone away for 2 hours? I mean, like there's very few places now, and
Well, it's
I think that's a
escapism.
beautiful thing.
It's absolutely escapism. And you actually bring up a really interesting point for these crazy and wild composers and people who have written and these pieces. Maybe there needs to be a better job done of telling the composer's stories. Who is Mahler? Who was Beethoven? And maybe linking that up with these pre-performance talks or a museum exhibit or some way to introduce newcomers to the who behind the what. It has more importance now than ever because you might see Mahler's third on a score and say, okay, cool, who? But if you learn that Mahler came to this because of a relationship with his therapist or something like that, then it
Yeah.
might link to you because everybody's involved in different parts of their life. And there might be that connection that's made in a different way. And so that kind of leads into my next question. You're touching on it a little bit. For those of us out there, not you or I, who grew up going to these performances, I still go to a Christmas concert every year and I dress up. I'm not just wearing jeans. I've learned that it's supposed to be a respected thing to get up, dress up. It's a nice evening out. But for those who don't listen to classical music or haven't had the exposure to it, what's the best introduction? How do you get them in the door? Is there a playlist? Is there a way that you suggest to get these folks, engaged?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a multitude of ways. I mean, I think I mean, my general feeling is that everybody knows more classical music than they think they do, right? So whether it's through movies or usually it's through movies, to be
I
quite
mean,
frank.
Looney Tunes
So,
and Barber of Seville was my first,
yeah,
if I'd known that was the Barber of Seville, not the Rabbit of Seville, but,
yeah,
that was my first exposure to classical music was watching Looney Tunes as a 5, 6 year old.
exactly, right. And then like, I mean, one of the ways that I can often get people to like kind of I don't know, I can grab their attention. They're like, oh, that's interesting. Is I'm like a massive Star Wars fan, like
Right.
just ridiculous fanboy. And the hardest part about that is I actually was John Williams' assistant on 3 occasions,
Oh,
and
no way.
having to work with him and like not totally lose my mind was actually quite difficult. Of course, it just made me into more of a fan because he's like literally one of the most beautiful, wonderful human beings on the planet. But that's a great like people understanding that like music is music, it's like especially orchestra music. Like there is so much great orchestra music being written for movies and TV shows. So if you're a part of that, you're already kind of living in our world, right?
Right.
So I don't think it's so much like, oh, you got to find a piece of music that you like. I think it's also just finding the right experience. So we do, we do offer a lot of different kinds of programs, and I think that's what I would encourage people to do is just see what you want to do. Like if you are more interested in like the pops world and how that relates to orchestra. We do a whole pop series at the Luther Burbank Center. So it's, jazz, rock and roll, Broadway. We do a ton of fun things there. And it's a little more, it's like shorter pieces and it's like a different way to appreciate what the orchestra does. If you just don't want to go for like a whole afternoon, or you have children, you don't want to get a babysitter, like come to my family concerts. A lot of orchestras, they basically outsource their family concerts, and I was actually one of those young conductors that benefited because I would fly around the country doing family concerts. But actually what I learned is that that doesn't it's like it was great for me, but it didn't mean anything to those communities because it was all outside people coming in. And so what I've done with our family series is I've tried to do it like Leonard Bernstein did with the young people's concerts with the New York Phil, where I give it the gravitas and the quality of the artistry, but also it's the Snoopy family concert series. So we're partnering with the Schultz Museum. So I kind of get to play the straight person, but I've got Snoopy, my sidekick, and the two of us help explain like musical ideas to the audience, and
Very cool.
it's a really fun experience. And actually we get a lot of adults and like older patrons that come now because it's kind of their chance to learn more about music as well. So if you want a real introduction to the orchestra and what we do, the family concert's a great way. Like yes,
Cool.
there's young kids there, but you can learn about what we do all the time. And then of course in our new series, what we'll be doing at libraries are these little short 30-minute shows. So come and go, catch a little bit of music, get to know our musicians a little bit, and hopefully, our outdoor concerts will be sort of that same idea. And like, that's the idea is it's kind of like what you said, it's being able to tell those stories, being able to really connect with the music and just feel comfortable with it, right? Like there's
Right.
no right way to listen to anything. And I hope the multitudes of these different programs that we're doing now is what allows people to feel comfortable with the Santa Rosa Symphony is, we're with us being kind of their home orchestra. Come enjoy us. We've got a bunch of different ways too.
So to all our listeners out there, you've heard it directly from the maestro himself. Go out, go experience the Santa Rosa Symphony concert, family concert, library short, whatever fits your mold. Go out there and make sure to support local music. Just like classical music, we here at This Must Be the Place are also always evolving, and we're trying something new with this podcast with a question from a listener. So Josephine McCormick from Sebastopol wanted to know from you: do you have a favorite piece of music that you would like to conduct that you haven't yet had the chance to?
That I haven't yet had the chance to. Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, there's a lot, to be fair. One of the things about really pouring my life into the Mahler cycle that the Santa Rosa Symphony is doing is that there's a few of them I haven't done, not least of which is the Third Symphony coming up this spring. It's like a year of study to take on a piece that's so big and so monumental. So like each one of these Mahler symphonies, in some sense, are sort of like, especially like dreams for like little kid Francesco. They're like definitely like dreams come true. I think, if I could pick anything in the world, what I actually thought I was going to do as a early on in my career was be an opera conductor. I
Okay.
love opera. I think it's some of the most amazing music. And unfortunately, I'm so busy with concerts these days that I don't have the amount of time necessary to be hired to do opera because that's usually a 3 week to a month long commitment. And I just don't have that much free time. So I miss the opera world so much. So if in a perfect world, if I could pick anything, what you'll see in December is me conducting a 25-minute suite from Strauss's opera Der Rosenkavalier, but it's one of my favorite pieces ever written. And
Cool.
if I could conduct that opera in full, I could retire. I'd be done. So maybe I should hope that I don't ever get to do it. But I would say doing the Rosenkavalier, the whole opera would be great. But come see me do 25 minutes in December.
Right on. So, a question off the cuff from your host here: is there a piece out there that you think is just overdone?
Like overplayed or like
Overdone, overproduced, overplayed? Is there something out there that you just have seen so much that you would never want to include it in a season of your own?
oh, that's so interesting. In some sense, I have my petty reasons on certain things. I have to be really careful, right? Because every piece of music has people, like if any overplayed piece of music is overplayed for a reason, right?
Right.
It's because people love it, like so much. I think fortunately I'm early enough in my career that there's nothing that I avoid like the plague. So most of the things I'm trying to think if there's anything I can share honestly. No, there's been pieces that have been sort of like enigmas to me that I struggle with, And, I mean, it'll be interesting because eventually I know we're going to bring, for instance, like Carmina Burana to the Santa Rosa Symphony. I haven't done it in a long time, and it is kind of a piece that I've avoided, but it's wildly popular, as you know. I'm pretty sure, I think the San Francisco Symphony does it every year. Like the big orchestras just use it because it sells out every single time.
Right.
And I have some very dear people to me who this is their favorite piece, and they want it so badly in Santa Rosa. So
But you're
it'll be
resisting
coming
a little
eventually,
bit.
but I've avoided it for sure.
Sure. Now, one last question for you here, Maestro. If you had to pick just one performance to see this season, which one would you choose and why?
Okay, since you're asking me like on a personal level, obviously all the concerts are very special to me. But as far as the concert that is going to take the most work and the concert that will kind of be like a landmark, like in my own life, it's going to be Mahler 3, right? In
Sure.
February. It is, like I said, it's a whole universe, it's a whole world, and the way that Mahler works, if you're willing to like open yourself up to it in a vulnerable way, is like you are not the same person after you experience a Mahler symphony live. Like to go through that, you can't not be changed because it is so personal. Like it just eats at you right away. And so you can imagine if it's that way to just listen to it, what it will do to you as a musician to study it, like to spend hours every day pouring through this score, pouring through something that is larger than anything else I've ever had to comprehend in my career. So like obviously like if you want to come see me take on the biggest beast that I ever have before, but also be able to experience something that like actually could change your life. It would be Mahler 3 in February.
Well, to our listeners out there, you've heard it straight from the conductor's mouth. And the way rates with health insurance are going these days, it's probably cheaper than therapy. So go ahead and go make plans to go see Mahler 3 in February for a life-altering musical experience. Maestro, this has been a fantastic conversation with you. I've really learned a lot about the symphony, your plans for the future, and how you give back to the community. Thank you so much for appearing on This Must Be the Place.
Thank you, Alo. It's been great talking with you.
Take care. The interviews are done, which means I think it's time to crack one open. Interviews make me thirsty, and I want you thirsting for knowledge about some great beer, both local and not so local. Each week, I'll introduce you to a beer I find discussion worthy and explain the nuances of what makes it fantastic in my eyes and why you should give it a try. And just to keep it on point, I'll even try to make sure the beer reflects the vibe or theme of the episode. After a rousing discussion with the conductor of the Santa Rosa Symphony, the mood was right to sit back, put on some tunes, and crack open a classic style of beer that seemed to be the perfect fit post-interview. After all that talk about the origins of classical music and some storied composers from history, I thought that sipping on a Hellslager, which is the classic German style of beer, was the way to go. Holy Hell is a lager from San Francisco's Laughing Monk Brewery, a North Bay favorite of mine. Hell means bright in German, and this beer is appropriately light and crushable. We've been diving into some darker beers recently, and I thought I'd switch it up. Plus, with this weekend feeling very unlike autumn, there's still plenty of good lager out there to enjoy. These beers are known for their light, floral, bread-like malt notes and high carbonation that make them super pleasant to drink. There shouldn't be too much bitterness at the forefront, and your nose should get hit with dough, a hint of jasmine, and light biscuit notes. Hell's lagers have long been a favorite style of mine and are also perfect to pair with food, especially cheese. Cheese fanatics out there listening, do yourself a favor and go snag some manchego to go with this Hell's lager. The bready notes and carbonation of the beer will help cut through the salinity and richness you get in the cheese. Just like our conductor would be wanting from his symphony, this should hit all the right notes. A huge thank you to Maestro Lecce-Chong for chatting with me this week. Until next weekend, cheers from your host. This Must Be the Place is produced by our friends at Pod Locally, an audio platform helping local voices connect to their communities. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or comment on all your favorite podcast apps, and visit the show notes for more information, links, and resources. Look out for our next drop on Sunday. Until then, I'm your host, Alo Galinsky, saying have a great week.